Okay, so now we're up to the TMNT all CGI animated movie that picks up with the Turtles after the defeat of the Shredder, who is absent from this movie entirely. Now, I remember when this was released in the cinemas and I remember being super excited about it. It was really the first Ninja Turtles movie we'd had since Ninja Turtles 3. And it is generally unclear whether this movie does follow on in any way, shape or form from any of the other movies, although some of the other movies are hinted at with little Easter eggs here and there, and we'll get onto that a little bit later. And this movie did actually boast quite a good voice cast, and I'll just mention a few that you'll probably recognise. Chris Evans as the voice of Casey Jones, Captain America himself, Sarah Michelle Gellar as April O'Neil, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Kevin Smith was actually in it as the diner cook, nice little cameo though, which I never actually realised that until this moment. The character Winters was voiced by Patrick Stewart, who played Captain Picard in Star Trek, and the narrator at the beginning of the movie was played by Lawrence Fishburne, Morpheus, out of The Matrix. And we have Nolan North as the voice of Raphael. Now, if Nolan North's name sounds familiar to you, it's probably because you're a gamer. Nolan North has voiced quite a few popular characters in quite a few popular video games. The one that springs to mind with me is the character of Nathan Drake from the Uncharted series on the PlayStation. Very good games and a very, very good voice actor. Now, let me just give you a little bit of insight into this film. We pick up with the Turtles, like I said, after the defeat of the Shredder, and they've basically got nothing to do really. Leonardo's gone on a retreat to boost up his leader skills, and all the other Turtles are basically trying to make ends meet back home in New York. You've got Donatello. He is now a tech advisor who's on call to give help to people who have PC problems and things like that. Mikey now works as a children's entertainer, doing things such as birthday parties, and he does these birthday parties whilst wearing a giant, massive turtle head as a disguise. So he's a turtle dressed as a turtle doing birthday parties. Leo has retreated to Central America to help villagers from bandits whilst learning how to become a better leader, as I just mentioned. And then we get to Raphael, who has been spending his nights dressed up as a metal-clad nightmare called the Night Watcher, which he keeps secret from his other brothers. He's become like this kind of like vigilante who stalks criminals at night. And April and Casey have their own business tracking down rare antiques. And that is actually where we get a lot of the plot from April tracking down some ancient antiques for a gentleman called Max Winters, who is an immortal ancient general who has hired the Foot Clan led by Karai to help him find 13 monsters. 3,000 years ago, the general opened a portal that made him immortal. Open a portal to make him immortal. That rhymed, but it wasn't intentional. So when he did open this portal, he also released 13 monsters, and his 4 sibling generals were turned to stone in the process. Now, in the present, he has found a way to reanimate his statue generals and starts to hunt down the 13 monsters so he can become mortal. Although his siblings have other plans to rule and quickly double-cross him because they don't want to be mortal, they want to stay immortal and remain strong statue creatures, I presume, to rule without him. So the Turtles must regroup at a time when they couldn't be further apart, when the city needs them the most. Now, ever since this movie come out, I absolutely loved it. I think it's one of the best Ninja Turtle films made, apart from the first film. And I think generally, all Turtle fans seem to love this film and rank it up there with the first movie. Now, I do think a few people had issues with the character designs, mainly the Turtles themselves. Some thought they were oddly shaped. Their faces and their feet and hands looked out of proportion. And the way they moved almost looked frog-like, like they were Teenage Mutant Ninja frogs almost. Now, I think it was just something to get used to, because after years of watching this movie, I actually like the design now. It's different, but I like it. I remember when I first saw the trailer for this, and I was hyped to see the Ninja Turtles in CGI for the first time, and this film did not disappoint. It's got everything. It's got action, humour, heart, and above all, a good story, and that's why this movie is solid. Now, as I said before, I'm not sure if this movie was intended to be a direct follow-on from the live-action trilogy, or just a loose follow-on, but there are some scenes that feature some really cool Easter eggs. There is one scene where we get to see the Ninja Turtles trophy room from their past adventures. You get to see the Shredder's helmet sat there on the shelf. You get to see the time travel scepter from the Ninja Turtles 3 movie, and you also get to see an empty canister of the ooze from TCRI sat right there on the shelf next to all these other items. You also get to see some Japanese armour, which may or may not be the same armour they wore in the third film. It's unclear. But there are quite a few other things in that trophy room as well, which I didn't recognise. But if you're a Turtle fan, maybe you would be able to spot a few things in there and tie them to some kind of Ninja Turtle adventure that you've either read or seen in the cartoon. Now, just going back to whether this movie is a follow-on to any of the other movies, I'm going to sway towards probably not. I think they just pay a lot of fan service into this film, and that is fantastic. They hint at some kind of battle between the Turtles and the Shredder that had gone on in the past that probably we don't know about, never got to see. But like I said, it is said that the Turtles did defeat Shredder in battle. Whether they want you to tie it to a previous film that you've seen or a cartoon, or just kind of accept that the Shredder was defeated in a part of the story that we just don't get to see. But I will say this, that this movie also had a lot of loose ends. The movie was always hinting at future movies. We had Karai promising the return of Shredder, and when the movie finished, it just felt like there was more to say. Now, it was rumoured that there were sequels planned, which saw Mikey join the Foot Clan, but with good intentions. The other Turtles would have travelled to Japan and eventually face the Shredder once again, but this movie never did see the light of day. There was also talks of Dimension X and the Technodrome, which would have been interesting, but no Rocksteady and Bebop due to copyrights once again. So I'm guessing this movie didn't do as well as they wanted it to, and that's a shame because it would have been nice to see a sequel to this film and see where they would have gone with the story, but it didn't happen. But at least we got one good movie out of it that a lot of Ninja Turtle fans seem to enjoy, and I, for one, am very happy we got it. And if you haven't seen this film, I do recommend you seek it out and give it a go, even though I've just told you most of the plot. It's a very good film, and you should seek it out and give it a watch. So, after the 2009 Turtles Forever nostalgic movie, we only had to wait roughly around 3 years before Nickelodeon released their animated series, and believe me, this series, in my opinion, was on par with the 2003 series. It was absolutely fantastic. And so now let's discuss the 2012 Nickelodeon TV series of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so, like I said, it was 2012 when the TMNT would find their way back to our TV screens, and this time it was in CGI. And I must admit, just like the 2007 movie we just discussed, it took some getting used to. The designs seemed a little off, but in the end I actually got used to it, just like I did with the movie. This fast become one of my favourite interpretations of the Ninja Turtles. It's just as good as the 2003 series with some significant changes. First of all, we have the origin story that's actually fleshed out more and more as the series goes on. Spoilers, if you don't know already, this is the origin that has been pieced together from different episodes. And so in this version of the origin story, Splinter is human before he is ever mutated, which, as you know from what I've said in the past, I hated it when Splinter was a rat first. In this, Splinter's a human, so it's already got my vote. Oh, and just like the 1987 series, Splinter is also Mato Yoshi in this. We actually see Tang Shen included into this series as well, and we also see Shredder's lust for Tang Shen, and in this cartoon we actually get told that the Shredder is responsible for killing Tang Shen and burns down Splinter's home. Very, very strong stuff for a Saturday morning cartoon, as you may agree. We would never have got that in the 1987 cartoon. So like I said, in this version, Shredder kills Tang Shen and then burns down Splinter's home. But here is a big twist to really mix things up in this TV series. Shredder actually imprisons Splinter and forces him to watch as Shredder walks out with Hamato Yoshi's and Tang Shen's baby daughter. Something that I believe had never been done in any Ninja Turtle story. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that has never been done in any Ninja Turtle story up to this cartoon coming out. And so it's revealed that this version of Hamato Yoshi and Tang Shen have actually had a baby daughter, and Shredder actually takes delight in torturing Hamato Yoshi by showing him that he intends to bring up Hamato Yoshi and Tang Shen's daughter as his own whilst Splinter is imprisoned. But wait, there's more. There's actually another twist. Splinter's stolen daughter is actually Karai in this. That's right, Splinter's daughter is Karai. And then of course Splinter and the Ninja Turtles become mutated later on in the story. After the human version of Amato Yoshi confronts some Krang robots down a back alley whilst holding a bowl of baby turtles, and in an accident they all get mutated. And in this version, Splinter seems like a younger, taller, more agile version of the mutated rat than we have ever seen. In short, he is a complete badass. His fight scenes are absolutely brilliant. Also, this version of Shredder is also 100% villain. Don't turn your back on this Shredder, he will just gut you. This version of the Turtles also incorporates lots of elements of the comics, just as the 2003 series did. Not only the comics, but the 1987 TV show as well. So you get like a mix of the comic books and the 1987 TV show in one. This TV series sees the return of Rob Paulsen, who voiced Raphael in the 1987 series. In this series, he is back, but this time playing the voice of Donatello, which I absolutely loved when I first heard it. I thought, what an interesting thing to do to give him the voice of a different turtle instead of having him voice Raphael again. And I also read somewhere that Rob Paulsen actually rang Barry Gordon, who played the voice of Donatello in the 1987 series, just to ask his blessing. I thought that was a really nice touch by Rob Paulsen. He actually sounds like a really nice guy. Now, as I said, they reference the 1987 cartoon quite a lot in this TV series. They also reference different TV shows, comics, and music that has been established in the past. For instance, in this version of the Ninja Turtles, when the communication devices ring, you hear the ringtone of the original Ninja Turtles theme tune. On occasion, Michelangelo can be heard saying "Go Ninja, Go Ninja, Go," which is a reference to the Vanilla Ice song, which was played in The Secret of the Ooze, the Ninja Turtle Part 2 movie. Also, the pose that the Turtles strike at the end of the show's main intro is identical to the original Issue 1 Mirage comic book. And we also see the return of Casey Jones in this TV series, who has also gone through quite a lot of changes. He is now a toothless young maniac who fights crime wearing a hockey mask with a skull painted on the outside of it. And like I said, he seemed to be portrayed a lot younger than these other incarnations on previous shows. And there is also a Ninja Turtle Easter egg on Casey Jones's hockey sticks for the ever-vigilant fan. If you look closely, you will actually see written on his hockey sticks the word Eastman and Laird, the creators of the Ninja Turtles, as you know. They also got the voice actor Robbie Rist, who voiced Michelangelo in all 3 live-action movies, to voice Mondo Gecko in this series. And Corey Feldman, who voiced Donatello in Turtles 1 and 3, now returns as the Ninja Turtle Slash. And then we have Leonardo, who was voiced by Jason Biggs initially. He was then replaced by Dominic Catronbone. And I've got to say at this point, I have watched this TV series with my daughter multiple times. We've watched it over and over again. She absolutely loves it. And I can say this about the voice change in Leonardo. It's really convincing. You hardly tell the difference when they do this. He did a really good job at matching the same tone and voice as Jason Biggs. I didn't notice the first time listening to it. However, later on in the series, Seth Green then takes over the voice of Leonardo in seasons 3 to 5, I think it was. And unfortunately, it was very obvious to hear that the voice was very different between the two voice actors. But here's the clever thing they did in the series. Previously to the voice actors changing over, there was an episode where Leonardo was heavily damaged in battle. He was very severely beaten up and he was unconscious. It actually mirrored the Raphael scene in the movie where they take care of him in the farmhouse. But in the cartoon, it was Leonardo who was being taken care of. And when he regained consciousness, they actually wrote it into the story that Leonardo's vocal cords were actually damaged in battle. And that explained the change in tone to his voice, which I thought was quite clever. And I never really heard of that being done before in a cartoon. I thought it was a really clever thing to do. This TV show really took off. Once again, you saw life being breathed back into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and once again you saw the toys reappear on the toy shelves, comic books, clothing, merchandise everywhere. I actually bought a lot of this toy range for my son and for my daughter. My daughter absolutely loves it, probably more than my son. I think he grew out of it eventually, but at first he very much enjoyed watching the Ninja Turtles with us, and I remember he had a Shredder figure. He had all the Ninja Turtle figures, but he had a Shredder figure as well. And I remember once we were out on the bus and he actually left it behind when we got off the bus, and I remember he was very, very upset about it. And actually replaced the figure and got it him again, and he actually lost the helmet what Shredder was wearing. It just seemed like he wasn't meant to have this figure, or at least a complete figure for some reason. But as he lost interest in it, my daughter kind of took over from him, and even now, to this day, she still asks me to put the DVDs on and watch it with her. And as a parent, as a child who grew up with the 1987 series, I love the fact that she wants to watch it with me, and I cherish these days before she gets too old and before she gets bored of them. Hopefully, she won't. Hopefully, she'll be just like me. Now, like I said, the series followed the route of the comic books in some sense. We saw the Turtles retreat back to the farmhouse like we did in the 2003 series. We saw the Turtles having adventures in space with the Triceratons. We saw the Future Toy again introduced into this cartoon. We saw the introduction of the Samurai Rabbit, Usagi Jimbo. I hope I pronounced that right. And once again, we saw a lot of the famous comic book characters make their way into this animated TV series, and it was a delight to watch. Now, you remember the Turtles Forever film that we mentioned earlier on, where the 2003 Turtles meet the 1987 Turtles? Well, they do a similar thing in this show as well, where the CGI Ninja Turtles meet the 1987 Turtles. And when the 1987 Turtles are transported into the CGI world, they actually become CGI characters. Vice versa, when the CGI Turtles get transported into the 1987 world, they become the old-style hand-drawn cartoon drawings, which was really cleverly done. And once again, it was really fun to revisit those old characters once again in these new episodes. Oh, and before we move on from this animated TV series, I forgot to tell you about April O'Neil. In this version, she is a lot younger than any other cartoon we've seen before. She's a teenager in this. She's actually the daughter of a scientist who is captured by the Krang, and the Ninja Turtles have to help her rescue her father, who is ultimately turned into some kind of bat creature. There's also some kind of weird love connection between her and Donatello. Not that she's interested, but Donatello is very interested in her being his girlfriend, which was a little bit strange, a bit of a strange element, but that's how they presented it in the cartoon as well. Well, saying that, it was actually addressed in the series by the characters how strange it was that Donatello was interested in April, and they were actually trying to convince Donatello at quite a few points in the series that she would never be interested in a Ninja Turtle. So actually, I think in this series, with Splinter's backstory, April's backstory, some of the different elements they introduced into this series, I think they were very brave and they took a chance, and in my opinion it was for the better, because this is one of the better TV series that they actually made, and it had a really good strong story that continued from episode to episode. I really enjoyed this series and I recommend you watch it, just like I've done with most stuff I've talked about. This was very good, very, very good series. And it ran from 2012 until it came to an end in 2017. Michael Bay produces films, and in a lot of people's eyes, he ruined something that could have been great. In this version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they are all science experiments. They're all born in a lab, including Splinter, who is also a lab rat. Now, in this version, April's father works in the lab also. He's one of the scientists, and April is responsible for naming the turtles in this movie. Splinter and the turtles are also mutated in the lab. A fire breaks loose in the lab, but luckily April saves Splinter and the turtles, and they find their way outside into the street, where April lets them go, and they find their way into the sewers, where they mutate further and grow into the Ninja Turtles that we know. Well, I say that, they're not exactly like we know. This version is a little bit different. Years later, the Foot Clan and the Shredder start terrorizing New York City, and the Turtles decide to rise to street level to fight the crime, and then they once again meet the girl who named them all, April. Now, if you've been listening to the previous episodes, you'll know that even some of the worst Ninja Turtle films that we've had, I've tried to show a bit of positivity in it as well, and try and talk about some of the good things that I enjoyed about it. But this film was a little bit more trickier for me. It just had too many elements that I weren't really happy with. So here's a few things that I dislike about the movie. The turtles are far too big. They are like hulking monsters. I mean, there are a few scenes where they just smash into the side of cars and tip the cars over. They're that strong. They now also seem to be bulletproof. I had a massive problem with this. The design looks a little bit ridiculous also. They have been given turtle nostrils, and I can appreciate that they were going for realism when designing the turtles, but it just doesn't look right. Also, Splinter's design looks really strange, and for some reason he constantly looks wet. That's the best way I can describe it, he looks wet. And then we have Shredder in this movie. It was like a huge transformer, one of the robots out of Michael Bay's other films. I mean, Shredder's technically in a big mech suit. I mean, I suppose he's got to pose some kind of threat to the Ninja Turtles, seeing as they're designed as these big hulking creatures now, but I just didn't like this design. And then there's the source material, the comic books. They just seem to be completely disposed of. It gives no personal vendetta between Shredder and the Splinter and Turtles. And the actual story that they come up with, the vendetta between the Turtles and Shredder, just seems really forced and out of place, like it had no place in this movie. Megan Fox as April, that's all I've got to say about that. And then we have the way that the Turtles learn ninjutsu. Splinter teaches the Turtles ninjutsu by finding a self-teaching book in the sewers, and they all become martial arts masters. Absolutely terrible. Absolute terrible film, terrible plot. Everything about it is just awful. The Foot Clan in this movie show no martial arts training whatsoever. They actually just use machine guns. They're more like soldiers. And when the Turtles actually start to fight the Foot Clan, there doesn't feel like there's any real threat or any challenge. You know that the Ninja Turtles are not going to have a problem getting these foot soldiers down, seeing as they're twice the size of them and twice the size in width, and they're bulletproof. But then if you cast your minds back to my favourite movie, the original 1990 Jim Henson Ninja Turtles, at least you felt there was some danger for the Turtles. I mean, Raphael got the snot kicked out of him by the Foot in that movie. You felt like there was some kind of threat, some kind of challenge whenever they went up against the Foot Clan. And I've got to say, as bad as the Michael Bay movies were, I must be grateful that we didn't get the initial script for this, an early draft. And in this script, the Turtles were meant to be aliens from Dimension X. So I'm just so glad they didn't go with that, because it would have made this film, which is already awful, 10 times worse. Karai also appears in this movie, but poses no threat whatsoever. And she's also given absolutely no backstory. She's got no character whatsoever. She's just there. And like I said, I've got nothing nice to say about this film. I'm sorry, I just haven't. I mean, after waiting so long to get a live action version of the Ninja Turtles, I mean, we've been waiting since the 1990s, and then we get this trash, in my opinion. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows movie. And also this movie was a continuation of the last one, and also it did have the same designs, the same actors, the same feel to it. I must admit, I did enjoy this one slightly more than the first one. And here's the reasons why. Now, before I go on, I'm not saying that this movie was a good movie. It wasn't, but I can appreciate what they were trying to do with this one. In this movie, they tried something they hadn't done before, and that was to blend in the 87 cartoon with this live-action movie, giving us at long last a live-action CGI version of Bebop and Rocksteady. And they actually look pretty good. They don't look great, but they look pretty good, you know, and it's nice to actually see Bebop and Rocksteady on the big screen at last. And even though I hated the first one, this was enough to draw me in to go and watch the second one at the cinema. We also got Krang and the Technodrome. And Baxter Stockman was also introduced Space More in his original comic book design. And I've got to say, he reminded me a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson for some reason. I'm not sure if anyone else thought that, but I always think that when I see this movie, I always think it just reminds me of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I wonder whether that was intentional. Now, here's the bad points I have to mention about this film. We did get the great fan service of the 1987 cartoon mixed in with it, but it wasn't enough for me to stop this movie being bad. Instead of attempting to make Shredder a more interesting character than we got in the last movie, he is now simply reduced to a side character who works for Krang, and even at one point in the movie, Krang freezes him and imprisons him, and that's it. We don't see him again. He isn't in the end of the movie. There's no big fight with Shredder. When we do see him, he's merely a character shouting orders to his henchmen. And then we get on to Casey Jones, who is also in this movie, another character from the comics and the TV show. In this movie, he is played by Arrow star Stephen Amell. Now, when I first heard this news, I thought, oh, great, he's a fantastic Green Arrow. I like him in Green Arrow, he's brilliant. Unfortunately, I found him to be another letdown. Casey Jones is a crime-fighting vigilante, but in this movie, they make him a corrections officer who wants to be promoted to a police officer, and he only wears a hockey mask in his spare time. Also, they just make him cheesy as hell in this version, not at all like the source material. And then once again you had the Ninja Turtles, who were once again big hulking monsters who were bulletproof. All that being said, there were some quite enjoyable scenes, especially the ones with the 87 classic characters like Bebop and Rocksteady and Krang, who was very grotesque in this. He had his big mech suit like he did in the cartoon. It looked very different in this, which was probably a good thing, to be honest, compared to the 87 cartoon. And Krang, he did look quite good actually. He looked disgusting and he looked gooey and slimy, but that's how I imagine a alien brain would look. But I did actually enjoy the 1987 elements of this film where they introduced those characters. It's just everything else that went with it just made this film bad. Again, just like the first one. But before we move on from the Michael Bay movies, I've just got a bit of trivia for you. There is a deleted scene featuring Judith Hoag, the original April O'Neil, playing April's boss. It's a shame that they didn't get this scene into the movie, but it is nice to see it anyway. And apparently there were minor tweaks made to the actual Ninja Turtle design in this movie to make them look a little bit more like the 1987 cartoon by making them a lighter green and changing a few other aspects of their designs here and there. But to be honest, they still look far too big and they look nothing like the 1987 series. Nothing at all. Apparently in the scene where Krang freezes Shredder and imprisons him, as Shredder is being put into storage on the Technodrome, you can actually see a frozen Triceraton and a Neutrino, both of these characters out of the comic books and the cartoon, so that was another bit of great fan service that they gave us. There's also a moment in the film where you hear the 1987 theme tune as the Ninja Turtles sound the horn on the Turtle Wagon. So, like I said, with the inclusion of Bebop and Rocksteady, with the inclusion of Krang, Technodrome, Dimension X, and with these little Easter eggs here and there, with Judith Hoag being introduced, with the Ninja Turtles theme tune from the 1987 cartoon, it would seem that this time round they were trying to please the fans. And, you know, I have said a few negative things about this movie, but truth be told, I did enjoy this one for pure nostalgic reasons. It's nice to eventually see the appearance of some of the 1987 cartoon characters, which made this one of my guilty pleasures. It's not a great film, but I did enjoy it in a weird way, if that makes sense. In 2015, we were treated to a 6-issue comic book featuring the Ninja Turtles and Batman. Now, in this comic book, we see the Ninja Turtles get transported into the DC universe, and they all end up in Gotham City. So we get the Foot Clan and Shredder running around Gotham City looking for certain scientific components to get them back home to their own dimension. There's a Shredder and Penguin team up in this comic book, and this gets the attention of Batman and the Ninja Turtles, and they soon team up to bring the Foot Clan and the Shredder and the Penguin down. Shredder also teams up with Raj Al Ghul later on in the comic, and they plan to take over both dimensions. This was successful and spawned a lot of sequel comics, including a comic with the animated universes Ninja Turtles and the animated versus Batman. I've not read that one, but I really, really want to. And then in 2019, we got the Batman vs. the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles straight to DVD animated movie. And it is actually very, very good. It's slightly different from the comic, but it's very good. In the movie, the Turtles come to Gotham City from New York. In this version, they live in the same universe as Batman. They don't live in separate universes. So at first, it's actually strange to try and think of the Ninja Turtles being in the DC universe. They didn't come from their own universe in this film. They actually exist in the DC universe, or in the DC animated movie universe, that is. In this movie, the Shredder and Ra's al Ghul plan to cause chaos in Gotham by mixing the mutagen with the Joker Venom. Now, I'm a massive Batman fan, especially the animated series, and my kids like to watch the Batman cartoons as well. And as I said earlier, they love the Turtles, and so I thought this film is perfect for us to watch together as a family. It's not a perfect film to watch with your kids, believe me. I nearly learned this the hard way. This film, like I said, it's not for kids. It's quite violent in some scenes. In fact, I've never seen the Ninja Turtles in any animation series that is this violent. There's stabbing, decapitations, real ones that is, not like in the 2003 series, it's real decapitations. It was rated PG-13, and this may be Nickelodeon's first animated movie to actually get a PG-13 rating. The animation is really nice, it looks great, although at first I must admit I wasn't sure I would like it. It grew on me, and it grew on me fast, and I was left very, very impressed. The turtles are nice and bulky, and look like the comic book versions, well, when I say that, they look like the recent IDW comic book versions. And then we have Batman, who is in his grey and blue suit in this film, and as usual, he's a badass. He's totally badass in this film. And then we get the Shredder, who is absolutely brutal in this movie. He's killing people left, right and centre. He's slicing, he's stabbing, etc, etc. He's not the 1987 Shredder. No way. He's not the 2003 Shredder. He's not even the 2014 Shredder. Like I said, this Shredder kills in this movie. I think it's the first time we've ever seen the Shredder kill, especially on screen. It might have been hinted to in some of the other cartoons that he may have killed people, but in this, he most definitely does kill people on screen. Like I said, it's brutal. And we even get a Batman versus Shredder scene, and we find out that Shredder is no joke in this version. He's just as good a fighter as the Batman. And spoiler alert, in the first battle, Batman actually gets beaten by the Shredder. The Shredder actually gets the better of him in this. And then we have the Ninja Turtles, who in this version have no problem whatsoever in using the weapons. If they need to stab someone, they'll do it. They're not bothered. Obviously, they're not as ruthless as Shredder, but if they need to use the weapons, they will. Now, there's quite a lot of fan service in this as well, which was nice. I'll just rhyme off a few of them for you right now. In the first fight scene where Shredder and Batman actually battle each other and have a fight, the one I was just talking about moments ago, in this scene, the Shredder jumps down from a platform into the shot, and it's all played in slow motion. And it was identical to the way it was filmed in the 1990 movie. You remember right at the very end of the film where the Shredder versus the Ninja Turtles on the rooftop, and he enters a shot in slow motion? And first of all, you see his feet, and then you see the rest of his body come down as he lands. Well, the scene in the animated movie was animated to look exactly the same as it did in the movie. I noticed it straight away as I saw it. There's no denying that's the intentions they had in mind when they animated that scene. And there's actually quite a lot more fanfare in this. Shredder in the animated movie has a scar on his face, which is another reference to the 1990 movie, because in that movie, Splinter was the one who put the scar on the Shredder's face by ignoring at him. And then there's a scene where we can hear Mikey tell Donnie that "you do machines, I'm the party dude," which is also another reference to the 1987 intro to the cartoon. Also, Donatello can be heard saying "Bossa Nova" at one point, which is a reference to the 1990 movie when we first are introduced to the Turtles in the sewer. And this one I quite liked a lot. There's a scene in the film where Mikey's fighting Mr. Freeze, and Mr. Freeze shoots some ice shots at him, and Michelangelo deflects them with his nunchucks. And it's actually animated to look identical to the way he deflects the ninja stars in the 1987 opening in the intro to the show, which I thought was brilliant. Again, just like the Shredder jumping down on the rooftop, as soon as I saw that animated in this Batman film, where he deflects the stars, I knew straight away what they were doing. It was so obvious, and it was purely just there for the fans of the 1987 series, for the people like me who grew up with the cartoon, who could appreciate something like that, and I really did appreciate it. It was cool. And like I said before, this is a fantastic film, and it's got loads of references that the fans will understand, fans of the Turtles and Batman. Saying that doesn't mean that anyone who isn't a massive Turtle fan or a massive Batman fan will not enjoy this. It is a very good, solid film. And once again, I highly recommend this film. It is a very good watch, and I really enjoyed it. If you've not seen it, give it a watch. It's brilliant.